Our scripture today is found in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 23. We're going to be focusing on verses 11 through 24. Last week we left off at the end of Acts 22, and I want to fill in what we're not reading today. So in the first part of Acts 23, remember Paul has been arrested. We talked about that in the children's service. He's been arrested. He's in jail, and the guard really wants to know what's going on, and so he's trying to get to the bottom of the things. And so, in the beginning of Acts 23, he takes him before the ruling body of the Jewish people, which is made up of Sadducees and Pharisees. The body's called the Sanhedrin, and Paul actually gets to give his witness to them. He has this conversation with them. The high priest tells him to strike Paul in the mouth, and Paul kind of rebukes the high priest, and they say something like, "You going to rebuke the high priest?" He goes, "I didn't know he was the high priest." And then he points out that, "Guys, I'm in trouble because I believe in the resurrection." And for the Pharisees, that was a big deal because the Pharisees believed in the resurrection too. And so, in that one statement, he causes a division, and again, the people start falling into mob rule again. So this is the third or fourth time that Paul is facing the mob in 3 chapters. He has a way of inciting people, of getting them frustrated and angry. Well, this doesn't please people. So Paul knows that things are not good for him. And this is where we are in Acts chapter 23, starting in verse 11. "The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, 'Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome.'" In other translations, it says, "Be of good cheer." Verse 12. "The next morning, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. They went to the chief priests and elders and said, 'We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here.' But when the son of Paul's sister, Paul's nephew, heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, 'Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him.' So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, 'Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you.' The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, 'What is it you want to tell me?' He said, 'The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give it to them because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request.' The commander dismissed the young man and cautioned him, 'Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me.' Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, 'Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to the governor Felix.'" I know that's a big section there, but it's an important section just so that you get the idea of what's going on. So these guys, they want to kill Paul. You know, they've taken this vow that you're not going to eat or drink, right? Well, you can go 3 days or so without taking in any water before you really start to fall over, sort of a thing. So these guys, they're essentially saying, we are going to put our lives on the line until we take his life. And if Paul is going to be escorted to the Sanhedrin, to give this report, he's going to have guards around him. And the guards are there to protect Paul. And in order to take Paul's life, these guys are going to have to kill the guards' lives too. Right? So you can get this idea of how much they really want to kill Paul. That they are willing to try to kill the trained soldiers as well as Paul to get at him. This could be a scary time. You know, if the Romans didn't care, they would have just said, all right, well, we'll just send Paul by himself, kind of a thing. But that's not what they're doing, right? And so Paul, as he is facing this, has a word from God. And that word is, be of good cheer, because you're going to be testifying in Rome as well. It was pointed out that after verse 11, for the rest of this chapter, God is not mentioned at all. It's just life happening. God makes a promise to Paul that, Paul, you're going to make it to Rome. And then what we see happening is Paul making it to Rome. But we don't see God mentioned in that. And it's important for us to look at that, because even though God is not mentioned, God is at work. It is reminiscent of the book of Esther. A lot of people like Esther because it's one of the two books in the Bible that really feature a woman as the hero. And then if you really go through the books of Judges, you find that women are heroes throughout the Bible. In the New Testament, they're heroes too. But I know a lot of people that they're just enamored with Esther just because she's a woman. The reality is, one of the great things about Esther is that we see God protecting his people. But you know what? God's not mentioned in the book of Esther either. He's not mentioned. Yet, he is still there protecting his people. We watch as God is protecting his people. And you say, why is that important? Why is that important that God's not mentioned? And really, Esther is the only book in the Bible where God's not mentioned. Why is it important that God's not mentioned here in the protection of Paul? Here's why it's important. I'm going to borrow some of Jen's children's message here. You know, she was talking to the kids about when they wake up with a nightmare, that they get to go and run to their parents, and they see their parents, and I was thinking, Abigail just climbs right into our bed. You know, the other two, they don't do that anymore. But Abigail, I wake up every morning now, and she's right there. Like, get off me. When's the last time when you had a nightmare, you looked over, and you saw Jesus standing right next to your bed? You know, we don't see visibly, tangibly, I can touch him all the time. We don't always see the hand of God writing on the wall, as Daniel got to see. We don't get to be like Thomas and go and touch the holes in the hands and the hole in his side and say, now I believe. What we do see is that through the workings of the world, God is still working. God is still active and involved, even when we can't see him. Right? Even when we sit there and go, God, where are you? Even when we sit there and say, God, why don't you come down now? We may not be able to physically put our arms around him, but we can know that he is present and he is working. So in this passage, he says, Paul, be of good cheer, because you're going to make it to Rome. And then he makes it so that Paul makes it to Rome. He allows this young boy to overhear. He allows the centurions to actually listen to the boy. You know, when they say he's a young man and he's being taken by his hands, I get the picture of Daniel. And you know something? When Daniel talks, a lot of people stop listening because he talks so much. And young boys have a tendency to tell stories. Daniel is not as much of a storyteller as Abigail is, but you hear the stories and you go, yeah, sure, that's great, kid. And as adults, we have a tendency to brush it. No, the centurions listened to what the boy said and said, okay, we'll do something about that. Okay, we're going to make sure he makes it to Felix safely. God is at work. God is doing things. And it's one of those things of, it's not a miracle here. Something that you see here something you don't see here that you saw in the Exodus. In the Exodus, not only did God do all these miracles through Moses and Aaron, but God hardened Pharaoh's heart. And we saw that. God hardened this, God hardened that. What we see here is God had set up the dominoes. So when he pushed it over, they started to fall in the way he wanted it to go. He had the machine set up to do exactly what he planned for it to do. Right? We see that. And yeah, all these people were acting on their own accord. They were acting within their own free will, but it was still God's will being carried out. God's plan. We call that the providence of God. It's the unseen hand of God acting without us seeing, without us knowing what he's doing, how he's doing it. The founding fathers of America believed very strongly in the providence of God. In fact, Benjamin Franklin, who is famed for being a deist, often said, we need to seek the providence of God. We need that unseen hand of God in our favor if we want things to succeed. The reality is we need to seek the providence of God. We need to seek out that hand. We need to recognize that it's there. And that's the first thing that I really want us to see here. But I want us to see something else. Because we can know that that's there, because we can know that God is in control, we can do something else. You see, he gives Paul a command. In the NIV it says, take courage. I prefer the translation, be of good cheer. Be happy. Don't worry. Be happy. Jesus will take care of you, right? Not Carlos. That's the way the song goes, though. We can be of good cheer. We can be happy because we know that God is working. There are verses that we all kind of memorize, for we know that all things work together for good to those who love him. Right? We have that verse memorized up here. But I think so often we don't have it memorized in here. Right? We can be of good cheer in these times of struggle. And I'm going to tell you that. I wanted to tell you guys, I don't have a sermon for you today. I have a sermon for me. All right? In these times where we're looking at the world and going, God, it's falling apart. God, I'm looking at the future for my children and I'm worried. Right? But God says, don't worry. Be of good cheer. It's going to be okay. The song we just sang, it actually wasn't the song I had chosen for today. I got a call last night from our music person said, can we switch it to this song? And that's the song that they picked. And as you listen to the words of the song, we are thankful even in our pain. We are thankful even in our suffering, even in this. And that's what he's saying to Paul here. That's what he's saying to us. Be of good cheer, even though there are 40 men who are willing to put their lives on the line to kill you. Even though you are in jail. Even though you are going through X, Y, and Z. Be of good cheer. Be thankful. Because God is with you. God is working for you. He says it to Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to hurt you, right? We know those things up here, but we got to get them down here. so that we may be of good cheer, so that we may be happy, even though we're struggling, even though we're going, God, I don't want Grandma to get the COVID, right? My grandmother's in a nursing home. She has Alzheimer's. We got to see her last night through a Skype. She actually knew who I was. It was nice. She has Alzheimer's. I don't know if I said that. I might have it too. She got to see Hannah and Abigail. Abigail, it was the first time she's ever seen her, right? There are at least 2 people in her nursing home who have COVID, right? And Jean made that face, oh no. Judy told us her brother has COVID, right? These are hard times. We get scared for our family members. We get scared for ourselves. I don't think Sam's still right from his infection. But God still calls us to be of good cheer. Take courage, because God has a plan. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do. But there's a secret to that. There's a secret on how we get beyond and it's the stop looking at the here and the now. Stop looking at all the things that are going on in the world. I've been watching a lot of stuff on the presidential election because I want to see whatever this evidence is, because I want to know, right? And I've been watching too much news, I'm told. My father told me this last night. You're just watching too much news. You just got to shut it all off, Gary. Well, that's the reality is we get too much information right now. We get too much and we don't get enough. That's the sad part, right? But we focus on all those bad things. When we first got shut down the first time, and Sarah keeps saying she thinks it's coming, that we're going to get shut down again. And if it does, we'll let you guys know. We'll still be online. And we'll still somehow manage to do a Christmas service, even if it's online. But our governor was on every day. It was hard. Eventually, we just had to learn to shut it off. Right? So that we could stop focusing on that and start being of good cheer. So we could start focusing really on the things that are important. So we could start focusing on Christ. And what He's done for us. The plans He has for us. Be of good cheer. Why? Because we know the end of the story. We know that Paul makes it to Rome. We know that God has a plan for us. And that He will see it through. He will fulfill it if we are willing to let Him work through us. That God has a promise that one day there will be no more pain, there will be no more suffering. So we can rejoice because we know that whatever we're going through today, it'll be over tomorrow. It's not going to last forever. It's just a temporary thing. So be of good cheer. Give thanks. Will you guys bow with me in prayer?